Hello and good evening friends. My name is Shantanu Vaidya. I am here with the new video topic. My today's video topic is exception handling types. Types of exceptions in Java. Let's start with the today's video topic. We all know before going to type of exception, we have to know about what is the exception and what is exception handling. So I'll explain the exception concept. Exception is nothing but the unconditional, um, undefined conditional condition which is occur during your program execution. It can be occurred due to two types, like it can be occurred due to some manual errors or some user defined errors. So that exceptions can be overcome by using exception handling process. If that exception is not going to overcome, that exception can terminate your code in between the flow. It means it is not going to flow properly. Your program flow is not going to properly run properly, and so it is you. So that is why in Java there is an one concept, that is exception handling, which is a mechanism which is allows exception to overcome that exception and gives the proper output of your code. So in that exception handling, you can use try catch method, or you can use finally keyword, or you can use a throw keyword. What exactly these three terms are, we will explain this after some time. But I'll go preferably I will go with the type of exceptions. First of all, there is a hierarchy in the exception in Java. So let's start with the main hierarchy. There is a main class, that is throwables, and after that there is a two subclasses, that is errors and exceptions. And in exception there are again two subclasses, that is checked exception and unchecked exceptions. And in errors there is nothing, two or types of subclasses. There is a single subclass, and in after that there is a sub child classes. um, I'm focusing right now in exceptions. So there can be two types of exception. First one is checked and second one is unchecked. I'll explain firstly checked exception. Checked exception is nothing but a exception which is going to checked by compiler during compilation, or the exception which is known by your system, and that system fully says that you can use a try catch method here, or you can use finally keyword, or you can use throwable keywords. So that is the checked exceptions. And checked exceptions can be example of IO exception, or file not found exception, or SQL exceptions. So these three are the main three are checked exceptions and non-checked exceptions. These three are the examples of checked exceptions. Secondly, non-checked exceptions. So what is non-checked exceptions? The exceptions which is not checked by your compiler during compilation, and that exceptions is checked during runtime. So that is why they known as non-checked exceptions or unchecked exception. The unchecked exception can be anything, like it cannot be defined by your machine or your program or your JVM. So it can be occur in somewhere that we cannot predefine. But a checked exception can be occur during defined stage of your code. So they assume, or they say that in the check exception, we can assume that they can ask us to forcefully use a trackage method. But in other hand, in we can say that an unchecked exception, there is a nothing like forcefully they don't say, or our system doesn't say that you can put a try catch method or anything like that. So your exception handling can be done. So we have to assume, or we have to think about that exceptions, and we have to use the exception handling method in that particular risky codes. So for example, if we are putting two numbers, and with that two numbers can be given by users, and that two numbers will perform a division operation. So we have to assume that if the um, um, number one is going to be any number between 1 to 9, and number 2 which is going to divide by number 1 is going to be 0 by user. So there at that time there can be an arithmetic exception, because 0 cannot be divided by anything. So anything cannot be divided by 0, so that is why the in Java there can be an exception like arithmetic exception. So for that exception, we have to use try catch method firstly, or we have to use finally keyword, or we have to use a throws keyword. So these three scenarios, or these three are the exception handling concepts. So in from for these three keywords or exception handling process, we have to assume that where is a risky code, and that risky code can be under the try catch method, or under the final keyword, or after the throws word will be there with the exception handling code. If this is present in your code, then your code's runtime will then your code will perform properly flow of your running the code. Otherwise it will get terminate during unnecessarily termination of your code will be done. So this is the unchecked exception and unchecked exception example. With the help of example, I have explained you both the exceptions type, that is checked and unchecked. So let's give the example of unchecked exceptions, that is arithmetic exception, null point exception, and out of index bound. That this in this exception there can be a two subpart, that is array out of bound and string out of bound. So this is all about today's video topic, that is exception handling, types of exceptions in Java. Thank you so much.